I found a definition which says a set of broad, high-level principles which gives the guiding framework to manage our data set. Okay, that's understandable. So a set of principles to help us manage our data sets. But what should be covered by data policy? Data policy should cover intellectual property rights, data quality, access to data, and all the different levels of accessing data. So the security or non-discriminatory access, privacy, data protection, still. But also data policy has to address pricing issues. What is public, what is private? And if we have a pricing issue, if we ask for a price for our data, we also have to cover this with a data policy. So in the EA, we do not have yet a data policy either. But why do we need it there? First of all, we have the size implementation, which gives us into a complex situation where proper data handling, dissemination, and use has to be acknowledged. Also, the owner's rights have to be carefully weighed. Who is the owner and what are the rights of the owners of the data? Legal notices are insufficient in a new ICT world. So we gather data from many different sources now. So it's not only our data that we manage. And we build systems for many different stakeholders. So all this brings up the need for a data policy. And we need a clear set of rules. Of course, EA has the idea of open dissemination of data as much as possible. So this is the primary rule which we use. But of course, in some specific cases, we restrict the access to data. And these restrictions are from binding rules from international treaties or national legislation that do not allow EA to share the data. But also, if we have voluntary data, EA has to tackle with this. So EA is in the process of providing the data policy. So I'll go through this process to show you the steps, what we are taking. So within EA, with the data policy, we plan to cover responsibility. So who is responsible for quality assurance of data? Who is the owner? What is public and what is private? We cover the data types. So what are the data sources? What are the derived products? So not the raw data. What is the confidentiality? The multiple use and reuse of different data sets and the control of the access. And of course, data protection. So what do we do in the EA to protect the data which is not allowed to share? So I'll go through some few concrete examples of what is meant. So we have a Nature Watch system which is involving citizens a lot to give us information on nature issues. So we have to tackle the quality assurance of those data which we receive from the public, because we do not have a clear quality control over there. We have a public-private partnership, so the Ein Earth system, which was built with Microsoft and ESRI and EEA. These are three main organizations involved, and we have to clearly define who is responsible for what, who has to do what within the system. Also in the WISE system, of course, EEA is not providing the data because it's coming from the countries, but a derived data set has to be acknowledged, or the value added that EEA is giving to the system has to be put there. We have to encourage and manage the reuse of countries' data. So we have several systems, but we have to clearly define in our data policy, we have to give clear definitions of how we plan and what is planned to be used. So this is a table which basically was collected for a different project, for a GMES in situ cover, when countries were asked whether they are willing to share their national data sets if they enter into the system. And the replies are quite spread out on the table, and as you can see, the full, free and open access to national data is very little. So countries are usually like to limit the access, but how much the limitation is there, it has to be tackled, it can be tackled, and some of them, or most of them, allow the use to national and public authorities. So it is not open for the general public, but at least for the national authorities, they allow the usage, which is already helpful in sharing, at least at the expert level. Also, EEA can use most of the data, and some of them just allow the GMES services to use the data. But in case the open access is not provided, then data protection has to be tackled. It has to be in the data policy, and it has to be clearly defined what are the steps, what we are making to protect those data, and how we cover that the general public doesn't access the data, but the national authorities do. So the process. Well, of course, we realize that it is a very important issue, and we have to clearly define all these steps and make a response. So EEA has proposed a data policy, has written down a data policy covering all these elements, and this goes into an internal review. So within the EEA, the experts go through the data policy, give their ideas, refine it, and make it better. It goes to Bureau and the scientific committee, and they provide also comments. And the whole document will be taken finally to the management board. And all these discussions, it's a long, long process which helps to have a commonly understood and refined good data policy. Thank you very much. I just want to add a few things that, of course, complex situations like we are facing, that we are getting information from several sources. We are combining the different sources of information into one probably publicly available website, or sharing environmental information. It is very complex, and we need to tackle it. We need to provide a complex solution. But in a way, building a shared environmental information system needs or requires as a basis an open data policy, of course, as much as it is possible. So that's why also I invited some experts from countries to add their experience on how they managed to open up their data sets. Thank you.
Thank you, Dezso, for getting us started on this discussion. You couldn't present a solution yet, certainly, but you were raising quite nicely, I think, the set of challenges which we are having, as it was discussed in the last session, different user needs call for different solutions and we need different types of data. So we're facing a variety of situations, and we will be more looking also to support Inspire-related data policy discussion in the future. So we will be increasingly faced with coming up with solutions which have a capacity to improve situations. But I think we have the time for 1-2 short questions now, if they are. Yes, please, in the first row, the lady with the black jacket.
Some of the research projects resulted with data, maybe surveys, but also research projects. How do you treat in the systems with data that are result of research? It can be once, it can be more than once. Am I clear?
The final word, whether it can be used once or
Yes,
more
I mean,
than once?
sometimes we have data that are not as a result of a governmental survey, or we are not monitoring this issue on a regular periods. There was a research project, and in the research, the result, in the report, we have data. Do you think, what is your opinion, how to use this data? Should we put it in our systems, or should we say this is research, it should be on the research reports at all? Can we use it also for policy or not?
I think this is an interesting issue, and of course researchers like to keep their data and use it themselves. But what we could propose, what would be a possibility, is data tagging. So whenever you use the data, actually in an online system, you can put the researcher's name and use it as an acknowledgement that he produced or he or she produced the data, and then it can be used as a sort of as a publication, so he can refer that his data set was used so many times or by so many persons, because you tag the data and you can follow how many people were using the data. That's another, that's a possibility, but probably it's an issue which has to be legally tackled. I find.
Thank you. Is there one more question at that stage? I'd like to add briefly, there are various discussions in that area, and there's means to tag data in order to secure ownership, and there are, especially in the scientific community, a lot of ongoing discussions how to best assure that the owner of actually the data, the intellectual property, is being preserved. So